We live in a world where you're told not to judge a book by its cover, but as a video game creator, especially an indie video game creator, when there's thousands of games released on Steam every year and you need to stick out from the crowd and stand above that, the first thing people are going to judge your game on is how it looks in those pictures. So, as someone who isn't an artist, it can be quite difficult to achieve the type of graphics that you need to get to make your game look good enough to people to spend their hard-earned money on. How do you do this? Let's talk about it in this video. Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Cuba. I am an indie game developer from the UK and I'm currently working on a game called Echo. If you've been following along with the channel before and looking at the devlogs, you'll know that recently I've been spending a lot of time working on the art for the game as a post-result of the game corrupting and files going missing and sad things that we're not gonna talk about because it's just... All that aside though, it's given me the time to sit back and think about how I can create some art for the type of style of game that I want to make. Now, I'm not an artist and it's quite difficult for me to create the visual style that I want, but keeping in mind some certain things, it's a lot easier to make a game look good and have really great graphics that stand out above the rest than you might initially think it is as someone who doesn't do art. As a precursor to this video, we need to come up with an agreed definition for what good graphics actually are. So, for the purposes of this video, and any game design that you might work on generally, I can say this is a game with good graphics, just as much as I can say this is a game with good graphics. An example of a game that has bad graphics might be this, or something like this. So in this video we're going to be talking about why I can define each of those like that, and how you can make sure you can define your game as having good graphics. So let's get into it. So what actually makes a game have good graphics? What makes a game look good? What makes this game look better than that game, or that game look better than this game? Well, in my opinion, and yes, it is my opinion because one, art is subjective. It completely depends on the person looking at the game to decide if a game looks good or not. Art and visuals in anything are completely subjective, so you've got to keep that in mind when you're making your game and not try and make the graphics for everyone, because if you try and please everyone, you're always going to fall into the trap of never completing a game, never pleasing anyone, and ultimately flopping in your attempts to be a successful indie game developer. So, with the subjective stuff aside, let's try and figure out how we can make a game look good objectively. There are some ways that we can do this, and the first one I'm going to talk about is your choice of colours. Colour scheme in video games is very important and something that you have to consider greatly for making your game look good. Even if you're using simple graphics like this amazing looking game Thomas Was Alone, which uses just cubes, but it looks amazing, you need to make sure you are keeping the colour scheme of your game in mind, because that's ultimately what's going to hook people in at first glance. Colour theory is something that can be difficult to understand, especially when you're not someone who's particularly into learning about theory, or not someone who's studied design or done any art before in your life, for example, me. So thankfully there's a lot of cool tools out and about that we can use to create good colour schemes and to even borrow them from other games. One of these tools is Adobe's colour wheel. In the Adobe colour wheel you have multiple options, such as putting in a colour and it giving you colours relating to that colour based on different colour rules, such as complementary, monochromatic colour schemes, triad colour schemes and more, which helps you pick out colours that you want based on a single colour that you put in and keeping them coherent with the specific mood you want. And then they also have a nice feature on there which lets you pull the colour scheme out of another image. If you're thinking about moods with colours, kind of think of the emotions that certain colours might make you feel. Blues are kind of sad, darker colours are a little more mysterious and dark, red is aggressive and passionate, and you can kind of play about with it using some common sense, but do some research into colour schemes and make sure you're selecting your colours in a good manner to give your game a bit of a boost above the rest. So tip number 2 for you guys is to not try and be a big brain know-it-all and think you can do everything yourself. because chances are you probably can't. And if I look at myself, I'm very much the type of person to say, yeah, I could do this all myself, it'll be fine, but I can't. I need help. I'm not an artist, and I need someone to give me some guidance or give me some pushing in the right direction. So tip number 2, make sure you're asking for feedback from people who know what they're talking about. This is easier said than done, especially when you don't have anyone in your immediate circle that is an artist. I'm fortunate enough to be partners with a graphic designer and also have my dad be a graphic designer, so I've got straight away there 2 people that I can say, hey guys, as designers, how's this look? And they can give me some accurate, constructive feedback on that. But as well, on top of that, talk to your audience. Go and send out some screenshots, get some feedback on things like Instagram and, I don't know, maybe even Facebook, or definitely Twitter. If you've got a Discord server as someone who's creating a community around your game, post screenshots out there and ask people what they think. And, you know, try and get some actual constructive feedback from people. It's harder when you're working from a community because some people aren't there to be helpful, they're just there to kind of be there, but need to be making sure you're getting that feedback from other people and getting some input to help you make your game look better and look how people expect it to look. Tip number 3 for you guys on a similar ilk is consider outsourcing artwork. Now, this can mean a couple different things and also links onto the not doing everything by yourself type thing. There are 2 options for outsourcing your artwork. You can go through the more expensive route usually, which is hiring an artist or freelancer to do some graphics for you. Now, obviously that is a more expensive option, and in the case of some people like myself who care more about the art than other people might, it's not a very appealing option. If you're someone who's got money lying aside to work on this game and you're a programmer and you don't really have a massive opinion about the art, as long as you can make the game and make it look good, then that's absolutely fine. Go and pay someone to do the art for you. But otherwise, other options you consider are collaborating with an artist or forming a team. So instead of doing things completely solo, find a friend or someone else online in a game development community who is also working on video games, and see if you can start a studio together. See if you can have them work on the project with you and figure out some stuff for how that can work. Obviously, going down that route, you'll have to figure out some things like revenue share, or if it's if you're going on for a long-term team and you can form a company together, but obviously make sure you do that with someone you trust and someone who's not gonna do the company dirty or do the studio, bad. And then option number 3 under that list is to use pre-made assets from the asset store or online. This is also known as asset flipping, and asset flipping usually tends to have a bad rep in video games, but that's only for games that look like they're asset flips because they look cheap, they look unprofessional, and they kind of look a bit cheaty and not very well put together, which we're going to talk more about why it's important to do these things in the next tip, so pay attention. If you look at something like The First Tree, a really successful indie game made by David Wheel, which is released on PC, mobile, Switch, other consoles as well, I'm pretty sure. Massively successful indie game, entirely pre-made assets. So when you're doing an asset flip, it is possible to make it look really good and make it look like your own. You just have to make sure you're tweaking the assets so that they look like your own things, and more adapting them to the purposes of your game rather than using what's there and adapting your game to that. You want to be tweaking some textures in Photoshop, or you want to be using color correction to shift up some ramps or whatever. Just make it look like your own and make it look coherent, which brings us on to the next tip. The next tip on my list is to make sure everything looks coherent and consistent. If you've got UI that looks like this and then a game that looks like this, it doesn't look like it fits together, and people are going to assume it's an asset flip or it's a bad looking game. You need to make sure you are keeping everything consistent, and that's easier said than done, but if you take some time to learn about font theory, keep that color theory stuff from tip number 1 in mind, and make sure you're picking assets from the same kind of art style, i.e. if you're doing 3D, make sure all of your models are low poly or high poly if you're doing something more detailed, and If you're doing 2D, make sure everything sticks to the same kind of style. If it's flat design, make sure everything's flat design. If it's nicely rendered brush painting, make sure everything is nicely rendered brush painting. But keep it consistent and keep everything looking like it belongs together. And the final one that I want to say, and this is for all of you who are like me and are stubborn and don't want to outsource to anyone else or use assets or get help too much, and it's simply going to be use simple shapes. There are so many games out there that are using a simplistic art style and simple shapes to make all of their graphics, and you can actually make some really stunning visuals just using simple shapes. Just using simple shapes and simple color schemes. I'll put some examples of games flashing on the right here so you can see just how many have actually done this and done it to success. If you are doing this, it will make learning a piece of software like Illustrator or Photoshop or their equivalents much easier, and it'll also make it much easier for you to achieve what you want to achieve. You just gotta keep in mind that it won't necessarily be these hyper-realistic, super amazing AAA looking graphics, because a game like that is not something that one person can make easily. Did I already say that I was going to do the final point? Because I've got one more that I want to talk about, and that is post-processing. Post-processing is possibly the most important thing for making your game look amazing, even if it's a 2D game. Post-processing, yeah, just so we're on the same page, I'm including lighting under post-processing because in some aspects it kind of is, and it also puts into your post-processing and how the final thing looks. So let's talk about post-processing effects. The most important post-processing effects that you're probably going to be using are color grading or color balancing, some kind of color changing thing. In Unity, there is definitely a post-processing effect for color balance and color grading, but you can use this to change the general mood by making things warmer. You can make it feel happier, more like summer, making things more purple and a little bit darker. You make it seem more mysterious, cold, dark, scary. So something like that is going to be really helpful for creating atmosphere. Next up, we've got vignette. Again, something very useful for creating some atmosphere and a bit more of a gloomy vibe. You've also got a white shift vignette if you want to have a white cloud around the edge, which makes things look a little more heavenly and godlike, bloomy, interesting like that, but another effect for you to play about with to make things look good. My camera stopped filming. Right, where we're at bloom. Bloom is something that you want to be using to give you a nice dreamy effect on your games. So an example of a game that uses bloom really effectively would be Thomas Brush's games Neversong and Pinstripe. You can see these games have a really nice dreamy kind of feel around them, and everything's got this nice subtle glow to it, and that is what bloom brings to the party. It makes things look nice and soft, makes the lights really pop, makes things look real good and real. The final thing that you might want to use is something like sun shafts or additional lighting things, especially in a 3D game where you have a directional light or a single source like a sun. You want to be using something like bloom so that you can, sun shafts that will basically just create a nice shaft of volumetric light coming through trees and make things look a little bit more like they would be filmed through a camera in a kind of dusty environment or a polleny environment where you've got particles in the air that the sunlight will catch onto. It's important to say, if you are using post-processing, which you definitely should, but for the post-processing that you use it within moderation and use your common sense, otherwise it's going to end up looking like your brand new to photography 12-year-old Instagram profile who likes to throw every filter on to excess to the point where it just ruins the visuals. I hope this video was useful to you guys. It was a little bit different again. I kind of want to do some more of these tip-like videos that are a little more general and applicable to anyone using any engine. If you watch this channel, you know I use Unity, and Unity has a lot of different features for visuals, but if you're someone who uses Unreal, you know that that's a better engine for 3D graphics in terms of visual fidelity. And then you might also be using something like Godot, which I have no experience with personally, but again might be completely different for visuals. And then you've got Game Maker, Stencil, you know, loads of other game engines, and graphics across all of them are going to be different. So I've tried to keep this as high level as I can and abstract to the point where anyone using any engine, playing, developing even any game, can take something away from it. Let me know what you think of this format in the comments. Like I say, I want to try and do some more videos like this as well. If you've got any topics that you want to learn about, let me know in the comments. And also, if you have a question for us, we're holding a Q&A in about 2 weeks time, so please leave a question in the comments and we will put that into the Q&A video. I will see you next time on Tuesday for the live stream if you come along to those. If not, I will be seeing you on Saturday, where we will finally be getting back to the devlogs for Echo, which I'm really excited to show you guys the progress that we're going on this, because it's coming along. It's coming along. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Till next time, cheers.